And then Murderpedia, which is also part of where I got this first, the part about Kim and her friend, was Kim kept going. They say, quote unquote, Kim kept going, and when her friend came back outside, she was alarmed to see the little girl going off with a man. Many witnesses that day remember seeing a little girl with an angry man, and he simply looked like a father who had been called to the school to take a naughty child home. They remembered the little girl was crying. No one thought anything of it. The school called her home later that afternoon to routinely check on why she hadn't attended the rest of her classes. Her parents knew instantly that something was wrong. Kim didn't skip school, and she was very dependable. She hadn't come home. They contacted the authorities, who went into the typical runaway theory, but her parents knew that she was too happy about the Valentine election, and she had absolutely no reason to be upset enough to run off. After 8 weeks of heavy searching, the bare bones of the girl who had been thrilled to become runner-up in the Valentine court were found in a pig pen. There was evidence of sexual assault, but no head trauma. It appeared that she had been strangled, but the decomposition made it difficult to tell. Thank you. Now, here's a list of suspected victims of Ted Bundy. Every woman he has ever been remotely accused or suspected of being involved with will be listed here. Cheryl Thomas survived. Karen Chandler, thank you, survived. Kathy Cleaner survived. Kimberly Leach, Lisa Levy, Margaret Bowman, Karen Campbell, Denise Lynn Olivson, Julie Cunningham, Lynette Culliver, Melanie Suzanne Cooley, suspected. Nancy Barrett, suspected. Shelley Robertson, suspected. Susan Curtis, Brenda Joy Baker, suspected. Brenda Ball, Carol Durant, survived. Carol Venezuela, suspected. Deborah Kent, Denise Nosland, Donna Manson, Georgianne Hawkins, Janice Ott, Karen Sparks, suspected. Laura Aim, Linda Ann Healy, Melissa Smith, Nancy Wilcox, Roberta Parks, Susan Rancourt, Santa Rosa hitchhikers, suspected victims, and he didn't even remember the names of a lot of people. He just would kill them and then drop them off. Catherine Devon, suspected victim. Santa Rosa hitchhikers, suspected victim. Santa Rosa hitchhikers, suspected victims. Rita Curran, suspected victims. Santa Rosa hitchhikers again, suspected victims. I'm not repeating them, just like randomly. Like there's 4 different years where they had gone suspectedly killed by Bundy. Elizabeth Perry, suspected. Susan Davis, suspected. Lisa Wick, suspected. Lonnie Trumbull, suspected. And Anne Mary Burr, suspected. Despite the appalling violence of his murderous spree in Florida, Bundy was captured by sheer chance. A police officer named David Lee noticed Bundy driving erratically on February 15th and pulled him over, discovering that his Volkswagen Beetle had been stolen. More importantly, he also found Bundy in possession of the IDs of several women. Now, despite all this, Bundy claimed he was still innocent. Bundy's Florida apprehension set off a media frenzy, which the killer seemed to feed on. As he was read his indictment of the Lee County Sheriff's Office, he spoke directly to the cameras that had gathered all for the occasion. It was actually the first televised murder court in American history. He said, quote unquote, "Go ahead and read it." And then he turned to the cameras and smiled and said, "My chance to talk to the press. I'll plead not guilty right now." Bundy fired his lawyer, and he wanted to be his own attorney once again. And as his own attorney, he would do really weird things. For example, he would refer to himself in the third person, such as calling himself Mr. Bundy. When he put himself on the stand, his confidence and his basically nonchalance about the whole situation would make people very interested in him. He was dressed in a khaki blazer and Seattle Mariners sweatshirts, and now he would get lengthy cross-examinations, but he would just start smiling. This is also seen in people such as Richard Ramirez. They would get, Richard Ramirez, another case. No, restraining order. I would say restraining order. Richard Ramirez, his case was, I'll maybe do a thing on him. His case was so bad, his psychopathy was just so uncontrollable that he would actually start laughing. Then the judge almost had to have him apprehended because he would start laughing when victims would go on, the families of victims would go on to give their testimony. He would just start laughing. And Bundy would just start smiling because he was I'm innocent. He was I didn't do it. And, where was I? John Henry Bowe, one of the several attorneys Bundy briefly worked with, described the killer's willingness to take the stand as fatally narcissistic and a miscalculation in his book, The Devil's Defender. He wrote, quote unquote, Bundy believed he could lie his way out of anything and he could charm the judge. He was wrong. Now, I apologize, I'm going to butcher this word like I butchered a lot of things. Maybe not the best choice of words for a murder case, I'm sorry. Hybristophilia, or the attraction to serial killers, is a thing seen in women more than men. When Bundy's trial happens, it became like a really clear and common thing. He would have a whole group of women who would attend just to watch and would dress themselves like how he liked his victims. So it would be hoop earrings, dark hair, thin, parted down the middle, all college-aged women, just like his preferred victims. One of the fans, Carol Boone, stuck up a romantic relationship with him, saying he had a playful and silly side. Their nicknames for one another were Bubbles. Bundy proposed to her on the stand. Now, due to Florida law, being in a courthouse with a notary public, which Boone had of course arranged because she knew he was going to propose, made it on the spot. If you were to propose right there, like any marriage said right there, is considered legal. So he proposed, she said yes, and because they were in front of the whole notary public, it was then legal. In a courthouse, it was legalized right then and there on the spot. That's one way to get a cheap wedding. So, when Bundy had bitten to the posterior of the one of victims who I had mentioned earlier during the very, very violent Florida crimes, the bite mark was actually compared to that of his teeth, and it became crucial evidence that he had killed her. After less than 7 hours of the jury talking, Bundy was found guilty of his crimes and sentenced to the electric chair. One juror said it was actually the bite mark that finally convinced him. While he was being sentenced, the judge court said, an exact quote, "Take care of yourself, young man. I say that to you sincerely, take care of yourself. It is a tragedy for this court to see such a total waste. I think of humanity that I've experienced in this court. You're a bright young man, you would have made a good lawyer, and I would have loved to have you practice law in front of me. But you went to another way, partner." And a lot of people got mad at the judge for kind of being like, you were a bright young man, blah, blah, but in my mind, I think having your possible future waved in front of you, knowing that you are on death row now and you will never get to live that life, is kind of an, oh, you could have done so much more. Like, in my mind, that's kind of seeing your future slip away right in front of you. I don't think it was necessarily out of line for him to, hey, sweet, what's up? I don't think it was necessarily out of line for the judge to make that comment. I think that it was really him being like, well, that's a real damn shame. Against the prison rules, Bundy and his wife conceived a child, Rose Bundy, during one of her visitations to death row. Bundy finally confessed to the press and his ex-girlfriend Elizabeth by phone call to 30 murders, but experts believe he may have killed over 100. He himself, admitted he didn't remember the names of a lot of hitchhikers he killed. Now, his ex-girlfriend was actually one of the people who called the police to tip them off about his wagon and everything. Because imagine you find in the newspaper someone going, oh hey, there's a guy with your name, your first name, who looks like you and drives the same car as you do, and he's been missing the same nights that you were not in my house. She actually made an anonymous phone call to the police and tipped him off saying, hey, I think I know who you're looking for. Now Louise, the mother who I mentioned at the very beginning, was working as a secretary in the University of Puget Sound and still married to Johnny in the 1970s when Ted was accused of his crimes. She refused to believe the charges for years, but after he confessed, her stance finally changed. Hey, Wolf. At the end of the second call that he had made to her, Louise told him, "You'll always be my precious son." The night before Bundy's execution at Florida State Prison was reportedly spent crying and praying. On his final night of his life, Bundy sat down for a very tearful interview with psychologist and religious broadcaster whose name was James Dobson. If you know the Christian conservative group Focus on the Family, he is the founder of said group. Bundy specifically requested the interview with Dobson and told Dobson he was feeling actually calm about his impending death. This was written, that little part was mentioned, I got that from aetv.com, which is another one of the many websites I use to do research on this, so please feel free to look them up if you want to. He refused to make a special last meal, because if you guys are not aware, in America, when someone's on death row, they usually give them the option of, like, a last meal. There's actually a book on it, like different ones, and there have been very weird requests. There have been kind of common requests, like someone said yogurt. I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was not Gacy, but somebody just requested, like, yogurt and, like, a milkshake and eggs or something. I can't remember exactly, but they told the last security guard to see them before they went into the, like, you know, The execution room, I'm saving those for later. So, they give you an option. One guy asked for world peace. One person asked for pizza to be delivered to homeless people. Hey, new in town, what's up? So, he refused, so he got the typical prison diet, which was steak, eggs, toast, and hash browns at 4:30 a.m., but he did not touch any of his food. At breakfast, better than what they would give us at school. Hundreds of onlookers had gathered across the street in anticipation of the killer's death. And now, nobody, there were plenty of people who were wearing different shirts, they said things like, Friday, Bird Bundy, Toast Ted. One guy held up a bedsheet that he wrote, I like my Ted well done on it. But there were none of his supporters. When he had done, when he was in court, there had been all these women who came dressed like his victims, were infatuated with this man, but nobody there was in favor of him. They were all there to celebrate him being killed. They were eating donuts, drinking beer and coffee. It was kind of like a rock concert, in a way. After sitting in death row for 10 years, he was executed for his crimes on Tuesday, January 24th, 1989. It is believed that one of his legs actually started smoking. He was 24 years old. 42 years old. Oh my God. Superintendent Tom Barton asked Bundy if he had any last words. The killer hesitated, his voice had quavered. Jim and Fred, I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends. At Florida State University, where Bundy murdered Bowman and Levy, the Chi Pi fraternity celebrated the killer's execution with an evening cookout. They served foods called electrified hot dogs and Bundy burgers under a large banner that wrote, Watch Ted fry, see Ted die. There were also a lot of celebrations around the country, including a barbecue at Mountain Brook, Alabama, hosted by 2 police officers. They called it the Bendy Q. It was in support of capital punishment and offered t-shirts for sale that said First Annual Ted Bundy Barbecue. There was one officer who even said his only regret was not being the one to flip the switch. I don't know what your opinion is on capital punishment. Feel free to let me know. Personally, I'm against it because there are so many innocent people who get killed. I'm not against it oh, well, blah, blah. I'm also against it because I'm let's be honest. Sometimes a life in prison, if you are hey, K-Loop. Sometimes a life in prison, if you are a murderer, is way worse. Specifically, if you are a rapist, is 100 times worse than death. So, hey, what's up? So, yeah, one person had said that. I've also never lost somebody to murder, so I can't really comment on it. It's not something I strongly believe strongly am against, but thank you for sharing. But that was, the t-shirts read, First Annual Ted Bundy Barbecue. And in his will, Ted Bundy actually requested that his body be cremated, not buried, and his ashes scattered over Washington State's Cascade Mountains, the same area where at least 4 of his victims were found. So, that is my notes on Ted Bundy.